Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today's video we're going to be taking a look at a new titanium tent stove coming from Pomoly known as the T-Brick Mini. So let's get right into it. Alright, so the first thing I want to do is open up the carry bag and lay all the components out on the table to show you what comes with the T-Brick Mini. Right off the bat, it does come in this nice black fabric case. It is a single zipper, two-handle bag. It's actually very durable, and it's got kind of this ripstop type material with these cross hatchings in it to prevent the bag from ripping if you do happen to tear it. It is a very durable bag, though, I will say that. So opening up the zipper, gaining access to the inside of the bag. We then have all of the components, and everything is included with this stove. On Pomoly.com, there are options that you can choose from with certain accessories and pipes and pipe length. So check that out if you are going to be purchasing one. But the first thing in the bag is the damper assembly. So this is a butterfly damper assembly with the 3 holes on there, sets on top of the stove, screws in. So we do have a damper. We then have a spark arrestor, and this is wrapped in plastic right now, so I might as well just get this out of here for you guys so you can see. We do have this very nice kind of lightweight spark arrestor. There are tabs to hook on here, so you can click on guy lines to guy it out, so that is included. And then in the bag, I have a 2-meter pipe with rings. So I've got 1 ring, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rings in total. Now for today's video purpose, I'm not going to be using this pipe. I'm going to be using a pre-rolled and pre-burned pipe just for simplicity. But the first time you use these pipes, you are going to have to roll it out and pre-form it. Usually 2 people to do that, and it does take a few moments. That's the reason why I'm not going to be using this today. Inside of the pipe is a pair of cut gloves stored in there, so you do have some cut gloves to help you with the first time rolling the pipe. After you burn the stove with the pipe rolled for the first time, it will build in memory, so then when you do collapse the pipe and roll it back up for safe storage, it will go easily. And then when you unroll it again to set it up, it will be 2 seconds to basically get the rings on there because it'll have that memory built into it. And then we have the wood stove itself. I'm just going to push this bag off to the side. Now the wood stove itself does have these black straps on it just to help keep everything contained. We also have a internal baffle piece, which I'll explain more in a little bit on that. We have a solid panel, so this is a solid side panel for the T-Brick. And then we have a glass panel side for the T-Brick. And we have the top and the bottom of the stove. So I'm just going to unstrap these, get these straps out of the way, and show you guys the top and bottom construction. And then I'm going to cover the specs on the stove. So here we have the top. We've got the 3 screws where the damper portion goes in. We can see the other screw where that baffle piece goes into. And then we've got some nice slots and rigidity and a lot of structural integrity to the stove. So we've got the top there, and then we've got the bottom portion, which of course is folded up. We'll get more into that when we do assemble the stove. So let's talk about specs. Alright guys, so let's cover some quick specs on the stove before we roll into the assembly process. On my phone, I have the current listing pulled up on Pomoly.com, and I'm just going to read through some of these specs. Now, the dimensions that is in the specs, I'm actually going to put up an image on the screen. You guys can view it, and I'll put that up over here or over here. You guys can pause the video and look at the dimensions because there are a lot, but I'm just going to mention the specs while you guys have a look at the image on the screen. The weight of the stove is 4.85 pounds, which is also 2.2 kilograms. The side glass is 9 by 3 inches, so that's the length of the glass and the height of the glass. And that is 23 by 7.5 centimeters. The pipe length is 24 centimeters, also known as 9.5 inches. So that is in its stored format. So this is obviously 2 meters long or 3 meters long, however long you order your pipe. But the length that it is stored at right now, that is the measurement that I just listed off. The pipe diameter is 2.36 inches, which is also 6 centimeters, which lines up to the damper size as well. So the pipe will fit over that. It is a 1 millimeter thickness of titanium, and this is a grade 1 titanium. So 1 millimeter thickness for the material on all of the components, making this stove very, very durable, just like the rest of the Pomoly lineup. and we are at 9.2 liters of volume for the firebox. And like I said, all the other specs and the dimensions I will put on the image on the screen. You guys can follow it from there. That is all the specs that I'm going to cover in the video. Now we're going to roll into the assembly process. Alright, so with the specs out of the way, let's roll into the assembly of the stove. Now, as mentioned earlier, I'm going to be using a pre-burned and pre-formed pipe for simplicity, as this is a backyard video. I may do a video in the future on how to actually roll the pipes for the very first time, but today is going to be a demonstration and an overview of the stove. So, the T-Brick series, the T-Brick Large, the T-Brick Ultra, the T-Brick Max, all the T-Brick series assemble the same way. It's very, very simple. This is not a fast fold stove. It's actually a pieced together stove. So these sides will slide in as opposed to folding in. So the front and the back do fold. So we fold those open. We then have the locking tabs on either side. We'll open those up. And for today's purpose, I think what we'll do is we'll put the glass towards me and the solid panel towards you guys. So I'll do the glass first. Just slide this into the grooves and it will slide down. And there are two locking fins that click into the front and back so they can't open or close. And it just sets in there just like that, totally assembled. The solid panel is a very unique piece because this is actually a double wall panel. You guys can see there's an inside skin and then there's an outside skin. There are vent holes all along the bottom. That is for an intake. And then on the top of the inside, that's where the air comes into the stove. And this creates a wood burning gas effect, and it helps build the stove with a very, very clean burn with some nice flow of oxygen. It also cuts down on smoke inside of the stove. And when you do happen to damp the stove down with the damper and the front vent, the stove can still breathe through the side, which keeps it safe. No smoke will leak inside of the tent. So this side just simply slides in just like the other side. Just got to make sure it's lined up. It drops right in there, no problem. We then take the top lid and set it on top. So for today's burn, I'm not going to install the baffle, but I'll show you guys really quick. So this is where the damper piece goes. We then have the baffle piece right here. And there's a thumb screw here, just a knurled nut. I'm just going to undo that. No tools needed, very simple hands operation. And this is, I believe, 0.6 millimeters in thickness. Everything else is 1 millimeter. So this just corresponds with a little slot that is placed inside of there, and then you replace the screw. And you can do this over multiple burns. So these don't get any more difficult to put in or take out. It stays the same, and that gives you your baffled area. So that way it'll help hold in a little bit more heat in the stove, but it will also restrict the burn rate. I usually use my damper and my draft to control the burn rate. If people do have issues in controlling the stove with that, or maybe you're new to burning stoves, the interior baffle will help you a little bit, and it'll also cut down on large embers being thrown out the pipe. Of course, we do have a spark arrestor included to help with that as well. So I'm just going to screw that back on because I'm not going to be using this in today's demonstration. We then take the top lid, place it on top, making sure it's totally lined up. And you want to watch your fingers when you do this, guys, because sometimes you can get your fingers pinched in the titanium. And I'm actually wearing gloves. It's catching on the gloves right now. So you just want to make sure your fingers are not near the edges when you press down, because it can bite your hands there. And then swing these gates up, locked. Swing the rears locked, just like that. We've got the stove body constructed. Now I got to put the damper on the top. There are 3 knurled nuts. Just going to unscrew all of these one at a time, and the damper assembly simply drops right in just like that. Replace the finger nuts, and this stove is incredibly easy to assemble, guys. Even if it's wintertime and your hands are cold, this is very easy to assemble. And what I often suggest, people often worry about these screws getting lost. Go to your local hardware store and get some motor paint, some header paint. Get a bright orange or a red, spray them. It'll hold up to the heat of the wood stove. That way they're easy to identify if you do happen to drop them on the ground. So I'm just going to screw all of those in, and that is our stove body totally assembled. Flipping the stove over, we then have 2 fold-out style legs. 1, 2, and we are totally assembled T-Brick mini stove. Alright, so now that I've got the stove assembled, I've gone ahead and put the chimney pipe on, and that goes on the outside of the damper piece. And then simply slide down 1 or 2 rings provided with the pipe all the way down over, and that creates a very, very tight, snug fit. That pipe is not going anywhere very safe and secure. And then you've got full operation of your damper control in the back of the stove. All right, so now that we've had a pretty detailed look at the stove, for today's burn-in process, I've got a mix of some hardwood rounds, I've got some hardwood pallet wood, and then I've got some kiln-dried 2x4 pine. And I'm going to be using a combination of these woods to try and get the stove very, very, very hot really quickly, just to stress the stove to see is there any weak points to it or not, because obviously I've never burned in the stove before. So I'm going to get this loaded up, we're going to get the fire burning inside of the stove, and we're going to see what it can do. Alright, so far the stove has been burning for about 15 minutes and I've got it loaded full of softwood. There's very, very dry kiln-dried pine and spruce, and it is putting out a lot of heat. I can feel a ton of heat from the front and the side. Again, with these double wall panel sides, so this is the glass panel. On the other side closest to me, it's double wall. There is next to no heat coming out of the side, so this is a very good side to put next to your sleeping bag or your sleeping pad. The other side is very, very, very hot. I can feel a lot of heat coming through that glass, as well as the front, and of course the heat rises, so all of the heat really flushes out the top of the stove. Underneath of the stove, I can actually put my hand down here where it is a mini stove. I'm actually quite surprised that the bottom is not dangerously hot at all. So if you did want to put a pair of mitts down there, I'm sure they would dry out nicely overnight. But this side's nice and cool. The front and the back are fairly warm, and the side is very, very hot. But all in all, it looks like it's going really, really well. So like I said, all the softwood is in there. We're going to see how hot this can get and what kind of warping comes out of it. At the end of the video, I am going to cool the stove down and dismantle it and have a look at each component individually, just so you guys can see, and I can see myself, what kind of warpage comes out of it. But already we're getting a little bit of coloring on the top. We got that bronze starting to set in. The damper piece is already starting to turn a deep bronze. The welds are blue, purple, got a lot of nice colors coming in there. I really hope this colors up nicely today. Now it is outside, it is cold, there is a breeze coming through here, so hopefully we can get this hot enough to actually change color. I know these T-brick stoves with the double wall panel, sometimes they're very difficult because there's extra titanium in there, and it usually takes about a night or 2 camping trips to really get some colors popping in there. But we're gonna do our best today. We'll load in some more softwood to try and get this guy cranked up very, very hot. And that is a ton of heat just rolling out of there, guys. With the firebox being as large as it is, it actually makes it quite easy to even get longer pieces in there, such as this piece of hardwood. So we'll load a piece of hardwood in there, and there's plenty of room to spare. So if I wanted to put even longer pieces in, I could. But we're going to get this cranked up with a lot of softwood and see what happens with it. And I'm also going to be doing a test of the draft and the damper, just to demonstrate how the stove can still breathe through the side vents, even with the front shut down all the way. So looking up here on the top of the stove, you guys can notice a distinct V pattern of spot welds. These are the spot welds corresponding with the inside fins underneath of the lid, right where that kind of V chamber is, adding a lot of structure to the top. But you'll notice that this is already turning bronze. This stove is putting out a ton of heat. Having a look at the glass side panel, you'll notice that there is blackening inside where I am burning a lot of softwood and a lot of pine and resin. Once the stove gets a really healthy cold base, all this blackness will actually burn off the glass by itself. But one thing you'll notice is the side is already starting to bronze, even up towards the top where this is a single wall panel. All right, guys, so we're coming up on the 1 hour mark now, and this is performing absolutely incredibly well. There is some blues and purples forming on the top, so we will get a little bit of color in the stove today. and where there's a lot of double wall panels, even underneath the lid, underneath the body, the sidewall, the back of the stove, which we'll have a look at when we do dismantle the stove. But there are a lot of double wall components in the stove, which adds to the rigidity, which also takes a little bit longer to change color. But this is burning extremely well. I've been sitting here manipulating the controls, and they are very, very, very responsive. Both the draft in the front and the damper in the rear, they are very responsive in the stove, and that's very typical of a smaller stove. Any little minute changes will be very, very apparent shortly after. So I'm going to let this burn for probably about another hour, and then I'm going to let it cool down, and I'm going to dismantle the stove, and you and me are both going to have a look at all the components and see what happened. All right, guys, well, here we are a little over 2 hours later, and the stove has totally cooled down. I hope it has cooled down. That's why I got the gloves on. So far, I have not seen any deformation anywhere. I haven't seen any failure points on the stove, but I wanted to wait and take it apart on camera in front of you guys so you can see with me what happened to the stove. So the glass side did blue and purple down along the bottom quite a bit. The top of the stove has quite a bit of bronzing, a little bit of blue and purple. The damper piece has gone through the blue and purple right into the white stage. The rear of the stove does have some bluing and purpling in there. The bottom of the stove, very, very little bronzing. I noticed that I can hold my hand underneath of it basically the whole time it's burning, and my hand does not get uncomfortably hot, which is really good for a smaller stove being close to the ground, so you don't have to worry too much about the ground burning. So let's dismantle the stove. So I'm going to start with opening up these tabs. Okay, so right away I can see a tab in the back tightened up, and this tab tightened up. This one opened freely, this one opened, this one's a little tight, and this one right here is going to need to be adjusted with an Allen key. That is very typical of these stoves. Once you go through a heating process, you may have to loosen or tighten the bolts. Very, very minimal. So that one does need to be loosened off a tiny bit. Take the lid off, and I can feel it is still a little warm actually. So the lid, let's have a look at this first of all. The inside of the fin is total blue and purple, so that looks pretty awesome. There is zero warping at all. I mean, that looks totally straight to me. Very, very nice. I'm going to let this cool down before I take the screws out because it is warm. I can feel it on my hand. So for the lid, everything there looks really good. Let's pull out this glass panel. That slid right out. No effort at all on that. The glass did dirty up, and I did not burn it long enough to actually clean itself off without scrubbing it. So you guys can see a little bit of that spitting resin on the glass. But this looks really good. There's no warping on it at all. None along the bottom area where it got really hot. It looks really, really good, guys. So awesome. Let's pull out the solid panel. 2 fingers. Came right out of there. No issue at all. The inside is very shiny with a lot of creosote. So that's from burning the softwood. And it's total blue, white, and purple. So this got very hot, but you'll notice the outside is still bare titanium color. So that's the difference between the double wall panel. This gets very hot. The outside is kind of a heat shield, and it breathes on its own. The breathing holes, the jets up there, the reburn pattern is not clogged, and it did reburn while I was looking at it. It was actually shooting out flames, burning the wood gas. So that's pretty awesome, and all in all, that looks pretty good. There's maybe a tiny ripple on the inside here from a little bit of heat, but it is a double wall panel, so there's no worries with that. Every stove on the market, no matter the brand, is going to have some degree of warping. Pomoly stoves have very minimal, where they are 1 millimeter thick titanium. That's the trade-off, a little bit more weight and a lot more life of the stove and a lot more strength. So here's the main test. Pretty awesome. So one of these screws, I think it's this one over here, needs to be loosened up. So during the heat process, oh no, never mind, it's actually loosening up right now as I'm opening and shutting it. So right away, the front and the back totally open, no problem. In the back, you guys can see there is a reinforced plate here, which is very similar to the bottom of the stove and the underside of the top lid. And that helps hold the stove rock solid, and it stops it from contorting and twisting. And that's where you get the very, very minimal, if any, deformation at all. And this is looking incredible, guys. This is looking really good. So the bottom of the stove on the glass side, so that would be the bottom there, did turn blue and purple. So that side got a little hotter than the other side. All in all, guys, this is looking great. And let's fold the legs in. No problem. No problem at all, guys. So, the T-Brick Mini. This thing burned very hot. It burned very, very stable. I'm actually incredibly happy with it. Let's get these screws off of here. Hopefully it's cooled down. And that's the benefit with titanium. It cools down very quickly. So this screw's coming out, no problem. This one's turning. All three are turning totally no problem at all. And comes right out. Our damper is still fully functional. No issues there. Guys, this is a champ of a stove. That inside screw is total white, blue, and purple. Hopefully it's not hot. It's not hot. Coming right out just like butter, guys. So get this totally out. So there's our screw. Everything looks incredibly well. So I gotta say, the T-Brick Mini is probably climbing the charts of one of my favorite stoves. This guy is incredible. So what do you guys think? Let me know down in the comment section, what do you think about the T-Brick Mini? I'm gonna get all of this cleaned up, and that is basically all that I've got for you guys for this video. I wanted to do a quick demonstration, a walkthrough with the stove. I give it 2 thumbs up so far. Of course, you'll be seeing this in more of my camping videos on the channel. Until next time, peace out, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.